The Early Weigh-In podcast is back. This coming Saturday, we head to Denver, Colorado. Some high elevation, high altitude fights should make for some interesting things there. And our main event takes place at women's flyweight, where we see Tracy Cortez stepping in on short notice to take on well-known two-time flyweight champ Rose Namajunas. And then in the co-main event, no idea if there's any relevance to this, but Santiago Ponzinibbio from Argentina taking on Muslim Salikhov. Argentina playing in the Copa America final on Sunday right after it. Don't know if there's any type of correlation, but there's plenty of other fights throughout the card that I feel like are more co-main event worthy, so I wanted to throw that out there as well. Interesting little 12-fight card now. Should be some bangers. Again, the altitude makes it interesting. Before we jump into things, man, horrible week from the both of us. I know we both ended up in the red. Not the best reads from us. I know I told you I lost 4 units on stuff that had never even happened before. So take it on the chin, forget about it, and move on to this week. So go ahead and let you recap it, and we'll jump into these fights.
Yeah, so we'll make it quick. First, you did hit a straight bet on Ian Gary over Michael Venom Page. Came down to the wire, man. Yeah. Not sure if he even covered the -145. It was a toss-up fight.
So, never hardly ever do you ever see rounds scored like 9-9, but that was 1-1 going into 3, and MVP won the first half of that, and Ian Gary won the second half. That fight was seriously like a draw almost. I wouldn't have hated it if that was like 9-9 for the third round or something. It was so even.
Yeah, I felt like from a fan perspective, you wanted it to be a draw, but I could understand why Ian Gary got the nod.
Right.
Hard to ignore the control that he had. Yeah. But you did hit that one. We both tried to take a stab on Carlos Hernandez versus Ray Tetsura. And for what it's worth, man, if you told me that, my plus 350 was going to have 4 minutes of top control in the third round, I'd play that every single day. So not upset with that with that bet at all. Prohashka by submission, plus 1,300. You took a small stab on that. Bueno Silva, scorecards, no action. You put 3 units on that, and it ended by doctor stoppage. It sucks that, the doctor had to step in for that to hit, but is what it is. Ricky Simone versus Vinicius Oliveira under 2.5. I know a lot of people who are on that bet, and
it wasn't even really close.
It really wasn't. It was weird, and the fight didn't go at all how I expected. So
me neither.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, I think just a couple of bad reads from us tonight or that night. Charles Jourdain versus Jean Silva over 2.5 rounds. Charles Jourdain, first time getting knocked out.
Yeah.
Can't predict that, man. -5.06 units. Looking over my card, 1 for 7 on my card. I took a little bit bigger stab on Carlos Hernandez with 1.5 units. I had Talbot round wins by sub round 2 and 3. He gets his first ever first round finish in 19 seconds. Looks like a monster. I'm sure he'll have just an insane price tag going into his next fight as well. After covering a -1,900 in his last fight. Pfeiffer by TKO was the only one that I hit at plus 185. Happy that I did that. It felt square playing it, but Pfeiffer was due for a knockout after suffering his first UFC loss, and he ended up getting it. Robertson by submission. I mean, I'd play it all over again. She went for it at the end of every single round, plus 260. I would play that again. I'd probably even play it harder. That was a really tough one to miss, to be honest with you. Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze, fight ends by submission. They had no intentions of going to the ground that fight. That was just a bad bet. Looked plus 1,000. And then Hernandez wins in round 2 and round 3. I don't know. I was big on Hernandez, dude. I thought that he was going to do it. And for what it's worth, he won that round 3, the clearest of any round that they had. So it is what it is. -2.65 units. And, it's certainly a night that we can both forget about. Moving on to the first fight of the night, a newly developed fight. They scrapped this one together on 3 days' notice in the welterweight division. Evan Elder taking on Darius Flowers. Flowers said on his Instagram, he'd never take another short notice fight, but here he is, short notice and at elevation here. it says that they're only an inch apart, but when I look at Darius Flowers, I do feel like although he's extremely powerful, he is a little undersized for the weight class. Not a very long reach at all, and it does seem like the UFC is kind of feeding him to Evan Elder here. He's 0-2. He kind of explained it in his Instagram post, but his back's against the wall. He can't really pick his opponents, and so this is just an opportunity that presented itself, and he's taking it. Evan Elder, a little more established. He's finally got a win under the UFC banner. In the fight prior to his last fight against Gennaro Valdez, he fought Nazim Salikhov, where there was a doctor stoppage at the beginning of round 3. Most of the people online agree that he was up on the scorecards. So we could, he almost had a win right there. And then Preston Parsons, I'm pretty sure he filled in late notice for that one as well. I think he's a little bit more proven, filled out for the division a little bit better, and I think he's going to put a pace on him. But it does seem like minus 450 is a little unwarranted considering they both got this fight on 3 days' notice. Evan Elder's the pick for me, but it's tough for me to think that he's going to cover minus 450 when he's not really finish reliant so far that we've seen him in the UFC.
Yeah, I'm with you. Line's a little bit absurd, but I do think Evan's the rightful favorite here. I think he's a way more well-rounded, way more proven cardio. Darius Flowers, like you talked about his Instagram post, it's hard to have any faith after seeing that. He's pretty much said he was left with no other option but to take this fight or what seems like potentially lose his job. Odds are stacked against him here. He's already shown that he gasses out pretty bad in all of his UFC fights so far, and taking this one up a weight class on short notice and the Denver elevation doesn't seem like that's going to play in his favor. So might not cover minus 460. You might get a better line live. I feel like Darius knows he's got to get this one done early, so he might come out the gates hot. But if this gets into round 2 or 3, I fully expect Evan Elder to start taking over this fight.
How do you think Evan Elder wins this?
Ground and pound TKO from top.
They got the lines at plus 250 by submission and by TKO, but yeah, I'd have to agree. If you look at his history, that TKO that's where he's gotten 50% of his wins. So yeah. Plus 250 might be a look there if you're trying to set that minus 250 in half.
Yeah, I could see him just getting to a dominant position on a gassed out Darius Flowers and just finishing him from top. Yeah, kind of how I envision that one going down. Some fight I have some action on, man. Moving up to the 185-pound division, we see Josh Fremd taking on Petroski. The line's pretty much it is a pick 'em. I bet Josh Fremd at minus 111 today. To me, this kind of feels like a clear side for Josh Fremd. Fighting in altitude, I think clearly favors the Factory X Muay Thai guy who's always in Denver fighting or training at this altitude. And Petroski's shown us that the cardio can be a real issue for him in the past. Durability-wise, I think it's night and day. Josh Fremd's a tough SOB, man. You see the stuff that Petroski's coming off of his last 2 losses, the Michel Pereira, very quick knockout, then the one against Jacob Malkoun, very suspect. And I know that Josh Fremd also coming off a TKO loss to Roman Kopilov, but that was more of like an accumulation of body damage and stuff. It's like he took all that he could there. I trust Josh Fremd's durability much, much more here. Size advantage, big striking advantage. I think he's going to be able to keep him at range with his jab. I think he's got a really good calf kick. And I just feel like Petroski has to wrestle here. He has to get it done early. I don't feel like he's going to win this fight on the feet. And if he has to wrestle, I've seen Josh Fremd in a very high-paced wrestling fight with Fluffy Hernandez. I don't think Petroski can keep up anywhere close to that pace for 15 minutes. So if Petroski's game plan is to wrestle, he better get it done early, and I don't think he does. So I like Josh Fremd. Pick'ems was plenty for me. I think he gets probably a second or third round finish on a gassed out Andre Petroski.
So we see this a little bit differently. I would have to agree with you that Petroski, a lot of his win percentage is early. Yeah. You can get Petroski inside the distance plus 225, and I think that's kind of where I'm looking to play this. Fremd, he's extremely tall for the division, and because he's a primary grappler, he kind of gives up a lot of the strength edge, in my opinion. Anthony Hernandez, he was able to continue that grappling pace, but Anthony Hernandez isn't really a muscle grappler, where Andre Petroski, I think for the first round and a half, he's going to be ragdolling Josh Fremd, and Fremd does have an issue with leaving his neck out, and Petroski's the type of fighter who, if he gets just the opportunity to just hunker down and squeeze as hard as he can, he will completely sell out for a submission. And I feel like this is kind of a tailor-made fight for that to happen. But like you said, like if it gets out of that 1.5 round mark, I really do think that your Josh Fremd bet will hit, because Petroski's just downhill from there. So I'm with you on that front, but I do think that Andre Petroski will get it done. I might look for like Petroski round 1. Let's see, that's plus 400.
Round 1 sub 700 on DraftKings, and
I think that's
his path, right?
Yeah, I mean I think that's a really good bet right there. Fremd's gonna. I at least think for the first 3 minutes, Fremd is gonna be in for a fucking shit show. He's gonna get tossed around. We've seen Petroski toss stronger guys around than Fremd, and Fremd, as much as he is kind of wrestling reliant, he doesn't have the most, the greatest entries. He does become somewhat predictable, and I think Petroski's probably going to hop on that. So yeah, Petroski inside the distance, round one sub, something like that. I do like that as a play, but possibly just a complete layoff spot for me. Moving up the card, we go down to the women's flyweight division. Luana Santos taking on Mariya Agapova. I'm sure you've heard, the rumors. Mariya Agapova not doing so hot in the personal life. She's apparently, struggling with drug addiction and asking people for money. Certainly not in the mindset that I'd like to back a fighter in. She's taking on Luana Santos, who's I would say pushed by the UFC. They would like to see her win. She's pretty. She, uses her sex appeal to the fans, and she's pretty dang good as well.
Yeah.
Mariya Agapova, kind of known for gassing. She'll go out like a bat out of hell right off the bat, and so she's dangerous in the fact that she's a big girl. She's strong. But not very technical. She has some takedown defense problems, and I expect Luana Santos to kind of expose that. Agapova wear herself out, and then kind of lay over towards the end of it. I don't really see her going 3 rounds, so the under in this fight is somewhat appealing to me, but probably just a layoff fight entirely. Seems like the line's pretty wide. For any low-level girl fight, it's tough to justify that line, minus whatever, 350, 400.
Yeah, been steamed. You touched on a lot of the same points that I have here too. All the out-of-octagon issues with Agapova and all the cardio issues that she's shown in the octagon, the deficiency in her defensive grappling. She has nothing off her back, very poor submission defense, and I like Luana Santos to finish this fight in rounds 2 or 3. I bet round 2 and 3 plus 500, plus 750 earlier today. Agapova's lost 3 of her last 4 fights. All 3 of those finished losses in round 2. So much kind of reminded me of the Na Liang, a girl that I probably see who doesn't have much left in her UFC career, a clear pattern, not being able to get out of the second and third rounds with cardio. When I see plus 500, plus 700, I'm going to try to capitalize on that. So I like Santos to get it done in one of those later rounds as well, man. Moving on to a really good fight, man. Montel Jackson versus Damon Blackshear. I think this is a solid-ass fight. Montel, you hear it from everybody, but all the potential in the world, athletic freak, that you hear about online, the size of the gloves the UFC has to give him. His hands are huge. You see his wrist control in the octagon. He's got the wrestling background. He's got a lot of tools. They could have been something special, man. It just some inconsistency, I guess, in the gym, in the octagon, kind of not been in his favor. I also kind of think he lacks a sense of urgency sometimes, a killer instinct. I think he likes being what they would call hammer to a lot of these low-level wins, but I really question him if he's
hitting some adversity in some of these fights. And I think Damon's going to push a good pace that Montel is going to be uncomfortable with. I think Damon Blackshear is a pretty solid fighter all around, really good grappling. You see him in Thailand working on his Muay Thai a whole lot this camp. I think he's a very underrated fighter. And I think he presents problems that Montel Jackson typically struggles with. When you see how he loses, it's to grapplers that cling to him. And I think Damon is capable of implementing that game plan. So I was really interested earlier in the week when it was like plus 140. Now it's closing to about a plus 110, plus 115. And I do think it's a close fight. And I do know Damon is the one taking it on short notice. Likely has to do some type of grappling. That worries me to an extent. The power shots on the feet probably coming from Montel. So I've decided to lay off here with all those things combined. But I like Blackshear to maybe steal a decision here.
Yeah, so even earlier in the week, if the line would have gone how I thought it was going to go, I thought Blackshear would get up to like plus 175, and that would be kind of the point where I would consider playing him, because I do think that he has a lot of potential to make the fight close. But if there's going to be anybody who comes out here and just dusts the other one, I think it's probably going to be Montel Jackson.
For sure.
Skill for skill, I got Montel Jackson, just a better MMA fighter, and you're probably getting him at a favorable price tag compared to the level of competition he should be fighting at this point in his career. Damon Blackshear is a guy who's getting his second chance. He's hit or miss as far as his performances. And this is somebody who I feel like, given how both these fighters' careers have gone, this line usually would be Montel Jackson minus 220. And you're kind of like dodging him being a parlay buster. But it seems like a lot of people are onto the fact that Blackshear could make this interesting, but it's certainly not enough for me to want to play him when I see all of the advantages kind of leaning towards Montel Jackson. So Montel Jackson's the pick for me. And like I said, like that's probably the value side at this point. I really do believe that. I think he should probably be minus 175 to minus 200. And so minus 140, it's probably a gift considering what level of competition he should be fighting at this point in his career.
Yeah, makes sense.
Moving to the women's flyweight division, Jasmine Jasudavicius taking on Fatima Kline. Fatima Kline scheduled to be on the Contender Series a couple months from now, but she was scheduled to be 115 pounds. She's taking this fight up a weight class against somebody in Jasmine Jasudavicius, who pretty big girl, man,
Yeah.
And we've talked about it plenty of times. That's a huge factor when it comes to low-level women's fights. And I expect Jasmine to utilize that size advantage against Fatima Kline. It says that there's only an inch difference between them, but I do think that there'll be a pretty significant frame advantage for Jasmine Jasudavicius. And I expect her to come in here and really grind her up against the cage, push a pace on Fatima Kline that she's not really used to. We've seen in her previous regional scene, at least of recent, she's been fighting smaller girls. She's fought up at higher weight classes, but just at this point in her career, she has been fighting down. And I think that this is quite a big step up for the first time that she's fighting UFC caliber competition. Jasudavicius at minus 115 is probably a decent play. But it's still juice on a low-level women's fight. And so it's a layoff fight for me, pretty easy.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at Jasmine, too. Earlier in the week, I did see some plus money, plus 110, plus 105, and kind of –
I'd have considered that.
Yeah, and continued to look at it, and looking at DraftKings right now, Jasmine's back up to minus 135 now. So this line's been all over the place all week, man. A lot of money came on Fatima Kline earlier. When I watched some tape on her, there's no doubt that she's good, man. I think she is probably the best women's prospect. My knowledge of women's prospects outside the UFC, not too lengthy, but from what I could tell, probably one of the best girls the UFC had not signed yet. I definitely think she's going to win some fights at 115 pounds.
I just don't think that she's been near tested at the level that Jasmine has been, and that Jasmine's going to test her on Saturday. I do think that Fatima Kline has some big advantages on the feet, and it's not necessarily because Jasmine's a bad striker, but she does have bad defensive tendencies, just being honest with you. There's all the talk of Fatima training, life partners with Erin Blanchfield. It's great. It's a great training partner. But I think Jasmine is just mean, big, gets in your face, likes to use that size like we talked about. And I was really hoping that I was still going to have the plus 110, the plus 105 come face-offs, because I'm kind of convinced that when these girls face off as well, that Jasmine's frame, I guess like you put it, will look a little bit significantly bigger, and I'd have to agree here. So she's also very well versed in the grappling department. Looking on her Instagram, she's been at SBG Ireland this time around, and she's been training with a high-altitude training mask a whole lot. So it's nice to see that she's been trying to replicate this altitude and environment that she's going to be in. And I just trust her more, in a fight that I think is going to be close and be hairy, probably late in a fight. It's pretty easy to trust Jasmine in those type of situations. So I don't know if I get to a play on her, but I'd have to agree with you. Jasmine Jasudavicius for the win on Saturday. This is a killer fight in the flyweight division. Joshua Van taking on Charles Johnson. These guys, for me, I see a lot of similarities between the two. Round one of this fight is going to be super crucial because that's typically a fight that both of these guys drop at a high rate. They look to pick up the pace in rounds 2 or 3 on their opponent. So, I think I just do feel like round one's going to be super crucial here. Both these guys primarily rely on their boxing. They have great cardio. And they kind of struggle with the same things as well, and guys who are able to take them down, good wrestlers. I really like Van's body work. I think he's a little bit more versed in the boxing, but I do think you're going to see a little bit more volume from the Charles Johnson side. I think he has a lot more kicks. I think his footwork's a little bit better. I think it's going to be used a lot in this big cage here. I think we just kind of see Johnson dancing around on the outside, pitter-pattering, making Joshua Van close this distance with the size advantage that he's going to have. The activity, experience, competition, man, at plus 195, I absolutely lean Charles Johnson here. I did take a shot at plus 310 on Charles Johnson's decision line. I think this is going to decision 8 times out of 10, probably, man. I feel like if anyone has grappling upside, it's Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson has shown me that, I don't know, like Jake Hadley, Azamat, Maxim, like both of those guys are better than who Josh Van's beaten so far. So Charles Johnson has shown me that he can compete with good guys, man. So at the odds, I think it's clear dog or pass. And I got Charles Johnson by razor close decision.
Okay, no, so we see this fight a little bit differently. When this fight first dropped, they had Josh Van at like minus 170 something, and I was thinking to myself, like, I put 3 units on Charles Johnson against Jake Hadley at dog odds. Like, I really do like him. I think that he's good, and while I agree, like, Hadley and Maxim are better wins than anybody Josh Van has won against, they're not better wins than Josh Van. Josh Van has shown me that he has like a different type of potential, in my opinion. Similar to Charles Johnson, they do have like a 5-round style where they start slow and then kind of build on that. But from what I can tell, Josh Van seems to have a lot more aggression, a lot more power, the youth. I think a lot of the things that Josh Van does looks really good in the judges' eyes. And even though we are in a bigger octagon, Charles Johnson does tend to let himself get backed up against the cage. And that's going to be where Josh Van does some of his best work. There were a few times, even in the Hadley fight, where Hadley would get him back against the cage. And it was just like, why isn't he trying to circle out right here? And he'd be willing to just kind of shell up, throw a leg up, and hope that, it's not going to be in combination. Josh Van does such a good job going to the body that I think, the more that Charles Johnson puts himself in a situation where he's just shelling up and he gives Josh the opportunity to land some of those body shots, we might see him go down. Josh Van I think that he's minus 250, probably should be minus 300 here, but maybe inside the distance or by TKO is kind of how I'm looking at it. Plus 550 for Van TKO.
Yeah, be the first person to ever stop Charles.
Yeah, and I mean, like, honestly, favorable matchups for Charles when you look at who he's been fighting and who's not been able to finish him. There's not a single guy on the list that is completely dominating dudes. Muhammad Mukayev is probably, the biggest finisher that Charles Johnson's fought. But outside of that, they're either shouldn't be in the UFC or not really a ton of finishing upside. So Josh Van, probably won't happen early, but I think as the fight goes on, he'll end up catching him, figuring out what figuring out that little shell that Charles Johnson does that I'm not a huge fan of. Is it me or you?
You.
Me. Moving up, first fight of the main card in the middleweight division, Cody Brundage taking on Abdul Razak Alhassan. I texted you. I feel like this is a gift line for Alhassan. Alhassan, not really the greatest fighter by any means, but he's certainly shown that he has a switch that he can turn on that is UFC caliber. Where Cody Brundage, I haven't really seen that, man. He's got terrible body language. He gets lucky in his wins. Really willing to sell out at any point. Just doesn't have the mindset that I like for a fighter. Alhassan sometimes doesn't cut it skill wise, and you can see the frustration in him. But he's not a quitter, and I think that's kind of the biggest difference in this fight is that Alhassan, I think over 15 minutes will eventually break somebody like Brundage, who's in a weird way looking for ways out. And I know that that's not the case, and it sucks that I have to dog on him like that, but that's certainly what it looks like from a fan perspective. He doesn't want to be in there at some point in times, and I feel like the moment that he feels Alhassan's power, the first real shot landed, he's going to be looking for a way out. And Alhassan minus 165 seems like a gift. There is a world where Cody does utilize that quality wrestling that he has, and maybe is able to ground him out for 15 minutes. That's a stretch. So, Alhassan inside the distance or finish only, that might be another one that I'd potentially look at. Minus 125 inside the distance. That's a lot of his upside,
Yeah, man. Alhassan's never won a decision. He's probably never going to win a decision. Fight's opening up the main card for a reason. Probably going to be I don't know, man. Shit show, truth be told. I think this is a super volatile fight. I could see the Alhassan TKO. I could see the Cody Brundage wrestling path. I could see Cody Brundage getting the TKO. I could see Alhassan landing takedowns. I think this is a shit show of a fight. Two very unreliable guys. I know they've both done some training in Denver, Cody primarily being the Factory X Muay Thai. So I wonder if these guys have had some type of rounds in the past with each other. I do kind of think that Cody has grappling upside, like you said, but it's also the last person that I would ever trust to stick to a game plan. He could very well just fold up with the first big shot. So I don't know, man. Alhassan, I think he's just kind of a bloated up middleweight at almost 39, 40 years old. I can't be going out to lay chalk on a guy who I think's knockout or bust, truth be told. Probably first round knockout or bust. So I don't necessarily think chalk's the answer there. But he, I don't know. If someone looks like the minus 500, like you texted me earlier, it is Alhassan who probably gets the round one knockout.
So finish only money line for Alhassan is minus 210. I thought it would be like minus 400,
Yeah. Well, I think he's live to get submitted, man. I really do. I don't have too much faith on him after round one, nor his grappling defense. Moving down to 145, pretty good fight, man. C-Rod, Christian Rodriguez taking on Julian Erosa. Christian Rodriguez, he's kind of been disrespected by the market, in his last 3 fights. Pretty sure he was a dog in every single one of them, and he's taken the O from Raul Rosas, from Cameron Simon, and from Isaac Dolgarian, and really good fights. And now they're making a move up to 145 due to trouble with the scale. Dude, he's got a 40-fight veteran in front of him, and I'm not sold that C-Rod is gonna find the TKO. I don't know. I feel like C-Rod has had guys gassed out in front of him before, in Rosas Jr. and Isaac Dolgarian, guys very inexperienced in the UFC, guys with less than 10 fights. And he can't put those guys away. And I know there's clear durability concerns on Julian Erosa, but we're talking about a 40-fight veteran who, I don't know. I'm just not so sold that C-Rod's warranted of this price tag. I think if this fight goes to decision, I think you're sweating a C-Rod ticket, truth be told. Erosa's very proven in his grappling chops, in his cardio. Again, man, I don't know. A lot of people are more sold on C-Rod getting the knockout than I am. I know Erosa's got like 8 knockout losses. Chin's not there, but I do think the line's a little bit wide. I don't know, man. Christian Rodriguez, I think, was good at 135. I think he's a really good anti-grappler. But at 145, I'm really concerned that maybe the size is going to be too much for him, and these guys are going to be able to grapple him and kind of negate him. So, I'll just take the dog and Julian Erosa. I guess without the faith in the big favorite, you kind of got to lean the dog. So, for picks purposes, give me Julian Erosa.
Yeah, I've got Julian Erosa as well. You can get his decision only money line plus 165, and if Julian's not getting finished, he's fighting hard against better competition than Christian Rodriguez. Like Hakeem Dawodu hasn't really panned out right now, but at the time, like I feel like he was at a higher level than Christian Rodriguez is right now. Rodriguez isn't very TKO heavy, hasn't had a TKO since the regional scene. Wins over Nate Landwehr, Sean Woodson, Hakeem Dawodu. It seems pretty disrespectful, especially when when knockouts aren't Christian Rodriguez's number one path to victory. It seems like Julian Erosa is going to fight you hard. It seems like almost an auto bet, maybe a unit on the money line plus 200 and then another unit on decision only. Pretty disrespectful because unless he's getting knocked out, he's fighting the best of the best, like
I'm with you.
He can hang with anybody. So yeah. Erosa for me as well. Not sure how I'm going to play it, but I like him at dog odds for sure.
Yeah.
Moving up to the welterweight division, Gabriel Bonfim taking on Ange Loosa. Interesting fight. Ange Loosa, really, really tough guy to finish. And Gabriel Bonfim, one of these, pretty finish reliant. He kind of got it, I say fraud checked, but not really. He fought a really tough guy in Nicholas Dalby. Kind of got the vet lesson, took him into deeper waters, got past that early onslaught, and was able to finish him in the second round. I think the UFC is kind of testing him again here. Ange Loosa certainly has been a punching bag in the past, but he's somebody who can take it for the full distance, and we haven't seen Gabriel Bonfim not get the finish. I don't know. It's one of these ones where I feel like the line isn't too justified when we've just seen him outside of round one gets pretty shaky, Ange Loosa is serviceable. And so plus 275 seems, like a appropriate stab to take for real on a fighter. Gabriel Bonfim has a lot more to prove to me. The only way that I could play it differently is Bonfim sub at plus money, like that's how he's getting all of his wins. Yeah. And I guess Loosa does have some grappling deficiencies, but sub at plus money, and then you can just play Ange Loosa straight at plus 275. You profit either way.
Loosa knew after that shit he pulled against Brian Battle that he wasn't getting an easy fight. And Loosa's proved durable in the past, but I do not think that he's fought a grappler of this caliber, anywhere close to a grappler of this caliber. And I do think that Gabriel Bonfim is gonna wrap up the neck in the first round. Definitely cardio concerns. I say that, the elevation, him never being out of round one really, and then the last fight. But also last fight was in Brazil, co-main event spot, a lot of weight on the shoulders there for a guy who had only had like 1 or 2 UFC fights, and he was taking on a guy who had like 13 UFC fights. One of the more proven cardio freaks in the UFC as well. Guy, a very proven guy who, just split decision with Rinat Fakhretdinov, a guy who 10-8'd Darren Till back in the day in round 3. Someone who uses that cardio as a weapon. While Ange Loosa is proven to the decision with good cardio durability, he's not one of these guys that uses his cardio as a weapon. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. I'm just more worried that Bonfim, might just be one of these guys who doesn't have it after round 1. But I think he's going to get in these grappling situations early, and I do think that he's going to finish Ange Loosa. Loosa's an athlete. Kind of one of these guys who's decent everywhere, but he really doesn't impress me as a fighter, if I'm just being honest with you. And I think Gabriel Bonfim's jiu-jitsu is going to be too much for him here, man. So not going to have any type of action on Bonfim other than our little fantasy league that we're in. So hopefully he comes through for me there, but I will not have any personal action on him. Moving on to probably my favorite fight on the card, Drew Dober taking on John Silva. I put 2.3 units on Drew Dober, minus 115. I've said it before about a line before. This is either just an absolute trap line or one of the best lines that we're going to be gifted in a long time. John Silva, I picked Jourdain. I tried to take the over. I'm not necessarily sold on John Silva. But I do want to give him his credits. That was a great performance against Charles Jourdain, first one to finish him. But to now have to go up a weight class on a week and a half, 2-week notice in elevation, a guy who I'm kind of not really sold on the cardio to begin with, taking on a guy who lives, trains full-time in elevation, fought the much better competition, I think has grappling upside, shown me elite durability. This fight doesn't seem 50-50 to me. I feel like Drew Dober should be about at minus 160, minus 150. I think it's comfortable to say I think he's about 60% in this fight. I don't know, man. Again, it's going to be either the best line, gift of a line that we won't have for a long time, or it'll be an absolute trap line, and John Silva is the truth. But I'm just not ready to say that. So 2.3 units on Drew Dober, biggest bet this weekend.
So, it's weird. I agree with everything that you say. Drew Dober is probably the better mixed martial artist. He has the weapons that if he wanted to, he could put together a decent game plan and probably win this fight relatively easy. But I can't think of the last time that he's fought to his strengths. He's more than happy to go in there and just throw down. And unfortunately, Gene Silva is as well, and he's a little bit younger, probably has a better chin. He's never been knocked out. And if Drew Dober does fight down to that level, I'd probably line Silva as a minus 120, But that's like the unfortunate part about it is because you're right. Like Drew Dober could come in here and look minus 250 if he wanted to. I'm not convinced that he's going to. I want to be right there with you and bet him, but I don't think I can trust him, so it's a layoff spot for me. Layoff spot for me. I can't even – Drew Dober is probably the play. He's the play for me, and I wish you the best luck if you do end up getting on him. Or are you on him already?
Yeah, I'm on him already. And looking at DraftKings, John Silva is the minus 125 favorite. You can even get Drew Dober plus 3.5 at minus 150 now.
Wow.
So a lot of love coming in on the John Silva side, it looks like.
Yeah. Weird one. I mean, Dober plus money might look a little bit different,
Yeah.
I don't know, but for now it's a layoff fight. It should be an awesome fight, though. A real fan-friendly one for sure.
Yep.
Moving on to the co-main event, and one I'd have to agree, it's kind of questionable that they've moved this one up to the co-main event slot, but, I'm not terribly upset with it. Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Muslim Salikhov in the welterweight division. Ponzinibbio, 37 years old, kind of seems like he's on the downward spiral at the tail end of his career. He's 2-4 in his last 6. And he's coming off of a knockout loss to Kevin Holland in a fight that he was pushing a really good pace, but just ended up getting caught. And unfortunately, that's not a good look at 37 years old. This is a fight where I feel like something extremely similar could happen. He beats up Muslim Salikhov with a whole lot more volume for 13 minutes, and then Salikhov hits a spinning heel kick. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Ponzinibbio does become predictable as the fight goes on. He ends up going to very similar combinations, very similar setups, and I think somebody like Salikhov, if he's hung in there for 10-ish minutes to get those reads, he probably will be subject to land at least one, and there'll probably be a sketchy moment involved, even if Ponzinibbio gets the win. I think that there'll be one good shot that kind of changes the trajectory a little bit. So Ponzinibbio's the pick for me, but at minus 185, it's a complete layoff.
Yeah, I'm having a layoff as well. Both guys, to me, are clearly past it. Ponzinibbio had all the health issues in the past. These days just doesn't look the same muscle mass wise, not reacting to shots very well. On the Muslim side, 40 years old, they're both coming off TKO losses. But, a couple years ago, prior to all the health concerns, Ponzinibbio is a massive favorite in this fight. There was one time where Ponzinibbio was on a massive run in the UFC and is one of the best prospects the welterweight division had in a long time. The Gunnar Nelson fight, the Neil Magny fights, he was tearing through these guys. And truth be told, I've kind of always been a Muslim hater. I've faded him in multiple fights. I think the guy's old. I think he's slowed down a whole bunch. His volume is terrible. He relies way too much on the spinning attacks, the big shots. There's no offensive or defensive wrestling. I think he clearly slows down in rounds 2 or 3. He's now lost 3 of his last 4, being knocked out in 2 of those. I just feel like there's clear signs of the decline in Muslim Salikhov as well. And I just feel like Pons is a little bit, I don't want to say like faster. I feel like Muslim is real fast twitch, so he's really quick with some of his shots. Pons is just like active, bouncing around the cage, really good long jab, really good volume. And I know he's not looked good as of late, and I probably would never lay minus 185. But I know Salikhov's a popular dog this week, and if Ponzinibbio gets down to somewhere like minus 150 by fight time, I do think he's 60% here. I think he's way more proven with the gas tank, like way more proven. And I do think in rounds 2 and 3, he's going to put a pace on Muslim that Muslim's not able to withstand. So I've considered doesn't go the distance here at minus 150. I like Santiago to get a late finish. But Muslim, I did see his knockout at like plus 400. And if that's not someone's path to victory, I really don't know what is. So Muslim Salikhov TKO plus 400, a little tempting. But I do like Ponzinibbio to get this job done and come through more times than not. And to our main event, Rose Namajunas taking on Tracy Cortez, 5 rounds at flyweight. Now, Tracy, I definitely think she's deserving of the spot. She's on a massive win streak. She's 5-0 in the UFC. And a win here puts her probably in the top 5 of the division, close to it. My issue with Tracy is I think the skill set is limited. That's the best way to put it for me. She is an above average wrestler for the women's division. She has really good wrestling. She's strong for the division. She's really good top control. And I'm not saying she can't win a fight if she doesn't wrestle, but her odds of winning this fight if she doesn't wrestle drastically decline. even when she gets the fight down, I'm not really sold on her jiu-jitsu or her ground and pound. She's not very active hunting for the finish on the mat. And I've never seen her wrestle for 5 rounds either. So that's a question for me. Rose is clearly going to win the minutes at range, I think. She's the far better striker. I'm a bit worried that she's, worried that the takedown's going to come, and it's kind of like the Esparza fight where she just doesn't throw because she's scared of getting taken down. Maybe that Rose comes out. I don't know, man. I just feel like skill for skill, the fight points to Rose to have big advantages in this fight, way more proven. Another Denver native, always training in this altitude. So I'm on the Rose side, but at minus 225, I can't lay it just because it's hard to fade someone at plus money with the grappling upside of Tracy. She could go out here and just get top control from guard for 3 rounds and just avoid being finished and somehow steal a decision. So I don't know, man. Rose is the pick. Can't bet a money line side. I think you're on Rose sub prop. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, dude, let me go ahead and convince you to join me over here, dude. Tracy Cortez, you talked about it, limited in her skill set. She wasn't training for 5 rounds here. And on the feet, she's going to run out of her little combination that she has pretty quickly against Rose. Yeah. She is going to have to shoot for takedowns, and I do think that they'll become rather desperate as the fight continues. You look at Rose Namajunas' last fight against Amanda Hebos. She gives up 4 takedowns, but then you kind of look a little bit deeper, and Rose got 7 minutes of control time to Amanda Hebos' minute 30. I mean, even when she is getting taken down, she's a far more skilled grappler, in my opinion, than Tracy Cortez. I mean, we're talking about Rose Namajunas, who has submitted Joanne Calderwood, has submitted Angela Hill, has submitted Michelle Watterson, a younger Michelle Watterson, somebody who, we just saw at 40 years old was able to fend off the most prolific submission finisher in the UFC and Julian Robertson last weekend. She couldn't get a finish, but yet Rose Namajunas could. Tracy Cortez is going to get to this 4th and 5th round, start desperation shooting, and Rose Namajunas is going to pick it up. I mean, she's super high level, and when you look at the girls that Tracy Cortez is beating, they're nowhere close to Rose Namajunas, and Tracy is going to decision with every single one of these, split decisions at that. And I mean, I feel like there's red flags all over the place. You get Rose Namajunas, whose main path to victory in her career is submissions, and just because she hasn't pulled one off recently, she's apparently 11% to get it done. Mm-hmm. Come on. I mean, this is absolutely crazy, dude. This is easily the easiest fight for her to get a submission in the last 5 years that she's fought. She's not going to sub Jessica Andrade, Weili Zhang, Carla Esparza, Manon Fiorot, Amanda Hebos. I mean, this is the first non-Brazilian /champion that she's fought in 5 years. She is so live for this sub, it's not even funny. So yes, I'm on it for a unit at plus 800 to win 8 units, dude. And I might be on 0.1 Namajunas sub 4 and 5 at plus 4,600 and plus 5,500. I mean, like, what are we doing here? If Tracy Cortez proves me wrong right here and looks like she's going to go to split decision with Rose Namajunas on short notice, I'll pay for that. But it's not happening, dude. Rose Namajunas sub, I feel like this is like the spot of the year, honestly. I'm trying not to put more on it, but I'm telling you, like, this is 11%. I don't know.
I love the confidence in it. Might just, I don't know if it'd be a tracked play, but you'll definitely talk me into having some type of degenerate cash on it.
As long as we make some money on it,
That's right. And I love the 4-5 look at those stupid odds. That's awesome. We're in for an interesting night, man. Denver elevation always makes things tricky. Looking through the card, there's quite a few pretty good solid fights that I'm excited for, man. So happy to talk with you. Up to 12 fights now. I know it's been through a lot of changes, but happy to see us come out with a 12-fight card. Hopefully weigh-ins tomorrow go smooth, and cash some bets on Saturday. I appreciate all you guys watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace.